When I was a kid, every school holiday, my family would head up to my hometown of Port Pirie to visit my grandparents. Now this place is known for only two things: Italians and morbid obesity. It has a population of around 15,000 people, so in terms of passing the time, there isn't really much to do. You could eat, gather and eat, watch daytime TV, kill time at the shopping mall, or in my case, develop a crippling video game addiction. Luckily enough for me, I had the perfect relative to help nurture that addiction, my Uncle Andrew. He had all the good shit: Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, Devil May Cry 3, San Andreas, Final Fantasy X, God of War, etc, etc. But the real good shit was in his room, where at night, if we were lucky enough, he would grace us by letting my brother, sister and I watch him play his brand new PS3. God of War 3, Bioshock, Dead Space, Arkham Asylum, Portal, games that broke my brain as I watched from afar, but none left an impression quite like Resident Evil on his GameCube. Holy shit, was that game something else. Even as a 5 to 7 year old, I could immediately tell there was something different about that game. The fixed camera angles, the atmosphere, the first ever zombie reveal as its head twists and the blood drips from its mouth and it just plops you right there for you to deal with him, became nightmare fuel for me years after. It was fucking awesome. I had a strong feeling that I would never get the courage to play any of them myself, as they seemed way too intense, but that all changed in 2016 when my brother copped me the Resident Evil Origins collection for PS4. And since then, throughout the years, I've made it my duty to platinum them all. So, now that I can safely consider myself a veteran of the series, I thought it'd be a good idea to rank them all. Not from worst to best, but just in the order that I played them, that being chronologically. Unfortunately, this will be a zoomer's perspective on the series, meaning I didn't get a chance to play the original PS1 trilogy of 1, 2 and 3, and I'll strictly be sticking to the remakes. The same goes for the Outbreak series, Code Veronica, the Revelations games, etc, etc. Only the numbered entries will be featured in the video. And with that being said, let's get it started with the prequel to the granddaddy of them all.
Resident Evil 0.
Despite being raised on the original Resident Evil, when I booted up the Origins collection for the first time, I was greeted with a menu giving me a choice. There were two icons, one with an eyeball that seemed very familiar, and one that I'd never seen or even heard of before. It was a picture of a train car with leeches surrounding the perimeter of the screen whenever I placed my cursor. RE0. I'd never heard of it, but I felt like it'd be a disservice to not play it first, considering its placement in the timeline. Now, in my critique of this game, I want to emphasize one very important word, and that is bias. I fucking love this game. I think it's amazing. I'm very aware that most people have made videos with very different opinions, but I find that in a similar vein to most people's first ever Final Fantasy game tending to be their favorite, a lot of my favorite memories of the franchise come from this game. The way it opens up with the title crawl that mentions all the future incidents throughout the series and how it all stems from this game felt like I was given access to some sort of secret information that I shouldn't be reading. The atmosphere is what gets me. The game has this sticky, green, tropical jungle feel to it with the way that everything looks and the enemy design, which kind of fits considering Billy's background as a disbanded soldier formerly deployed in Africa, as I bet these were the kinds of creatures he would see whilst on a mission in what the game clearly emphasizes was a traumatic event for him. With giant cockroaches, spiders, leeches, monkeys, scorpions, centipedes, and giant hellbats standing in the way, it really sinks in that there's some kind of fucked infestation going on, and all of Billy's demons from the past are out there and still haunting him. And the train car, oh my god, the lifeless husks everywhere, and the documents strewn about the place with the pattering of rain on the windows outside. Just look at this. But then it suddenly shifts from the confined spaces and linear design of the train to this big fuck-off training facility with 100 different doors, all leading to God knows where, while this eerie music booms in the background, this reverberating boom that echoes throughout the facility, instilling this feeling that something very unnatural is living and breathing within the very walls of the building. This game also has a very unique mechanic compared to that of future entries, as you'll be spending the entire game with a partner. It kind of feels like the precursor to RE5 in that sense, but feels a bit more deep, as instead of just having a homie to dunk on enemies with who might steal your ammo sometimes, you actually have to make legitimately important inventory management decisions, juggling health, ammo, and key items between Rebecca and Billy. There are also these neat little discrepancies between the two, like how Rebecca can't take as much damage as Billy, but is the only one who can mix healing items due to being a medic, whilst Billy can take more punishment and is the only one who can use a lighter for some reason. There's also this cool little detail where if you're playing as Billy and you have Rebecca set to attack, she'll only begin shooting when you do. However, if you're playing as Rebecca and have Billy set to attack, he's going to go full on William Large Penis, no matter the context, which gives a neat little insight into the nature of both their characters. However, as much as I sing this game's praises, it is most certainly not without its flaws, most of which come from the latter half of the game. There'll come a point on the train where you'll be using a hook shot to reach the roof and make your way to a leech-infested compartment, and after you use it, it goes completely unimplemented for the next 3 to 4 hours, where you assume, it was just a one-time thing. So most likely, you'll leave it on the fucking ground where it belongs. But eventually you'll be leaving the training facility and entering a church that commences a boss fight with the Hellbat. Once you have him down, there's going to be a giant hole in the ceiling where your player character mentions, "Looks like you could use something to get up there." So you're like, oh, okay, I'm sure there's an item or a switch somewhere to help me get up, but guess what? Sorry, fucker. You're gonna have to go all the way back to where the fucking train derailed, pick up the hookshot, and come all the way back. But you're not done there. There's another section just ahead after using the elevator where a hole in the ceiling suggests you should use the hookshot again to investigate what's up there. So, knowing that fucking Mandela County could be up there for all you know, you wouldn't be blamed for choosing Billy to go up, as he's a lot less likely to die in most situations. But for the love of all of fuck, do not do that. Otherwise, say goodbye to half your health items and ammo. See, there's a key item up there, and it's required in order to progress the rest of the game. And the only way to get it is to utilize the red and green chemicals scattered throughout the latter parts of the game. So you could either go up there as Billy, grab the vial, send it down to Rebecca, have her backtrack all the way to the medical beds of the training facility while getting fucked up by monkeys.
If there's an eliminator in here, I'm gonna be fucking pissed. There's an eliminator in here. There's 2.
To get the chemicals, come all the way back through the same monkeys, create the item, and finally use it. Or you could just send up Rebecca and get it all done in 5 seconds. By the way, Leech Hunter mode fucking sucks. I hate it. Because some absolute Einstein on the dev team decided to loop the exact same overly intense cheesy track over and over again for the entire 2 hours or so it takes to beat it. So if you're about to attempt it, I strongly suggest muting your TV before you find yourself in a padded room wearing a straitjacket. But other than that, I love this game. I love how during the ending, the camera slowly pans over to the RE1 mansion like it's all this continuous, never-ending nightmare that poor Rebecca has to slog through all over again. It began my journey into the RE franchise perfectly, and although I can't in good conscience put it in S tier, putting it anywhere lower than A would split my heart in half, so I'm putting it there.
Resident Evil.
Here we are, the granddaddy of them all, RE Remake. Now, although I love RE0, RE1 has this aura of quality to it, like every single camera angle, enemy placement, item placement, save room, and boss fight were all meticulously planned by the director to instill the maximum possible feeling of unease at all times. Now, unfortunately, due to watching my uncle play back in the day, I knew full well of Crimson Heads by the time of my first playthrough, a piece of information I would really regret knowing beforehand. See, the way this game is meant to progress is that you make your way through your first playthrough killing zombies at your leisure, until you begin backtracking those initial areas to collect the masks. When this happens, enough time would have passed for you to experience this for the first time. See, this first encounter with the Crimson Heads is intended to trigger a sinking feeling within the player as they slowly begin to realize that every single zombie they had killed up to that point is now a ticking time bomb that could at any time spring back to life as a Crimson Head. An absolutely iconic moment for first-time players that I completely missed out on. It was very unfortunate, but still, somehow for every iconic moment this game throws at you, it's got another 7 up its sleeve, like the slow reveal of Lisa Trevor, an enemy which I interpret as the progenitor to Mr. X and Nemesis, only with more eerie and tragic undertones. Beginning when you're just a little RE1 baby, exploring the first area the game puts you in, you're presented with a set of double doors that lead to what seem to be the basement of the mansion. So upon first inspection, you're greeted with this. A light foreshadowing of something you'll be hearing quite a lot in the late game. Her entire character gives off this Jason Voorhees aesthetic of a tortured soul you initially perceive as a terrifying monster that you eventually come to sympathize with. Hell, your first true encounter with her is in a cabin in the woods. Like, for fuck's sake, how Friday the 13th can you get? The shark tank is also one that resonated with me a lot. You're led down to this impossibly large underground facility, and greeting you at the end is a tank filled with giant experimental zombie sharks. And if you think that's a bit wacky, get used to it, as this moment pretty much encapsulates the entirety of Resident Evil. Apart from the otherwise relatively rare insta-kill hunter attack, the shark is the only enemy that can consistently kill you 100% of the time. It's fucking awesome. Eventually, to obtain a key item, you need to drain the shark tank, then make your way down to the bottom, and right next to the razor-toothed mouth of that lies your precious item. How fucking cool is that? Like, the game knows exactly what's going to make your toes curl up as you tiptoe past the mouth of an enemy that's most likely insta-killed you several times by now. Not enough genius game design for you? Well, how about the section during the final stretch of the game where you have to carry an armed bomb past a heavily infested area? Sounds easy enough, except the bomb explodes if you run, meaning you have to waddle through 3 heavily infested areas without getting touched once. Otherwise, it's like these set pieces were engineered by higher forms of consciousness that have an omnipotent sense of what is going to make me shit myself. Seriously, that's all this game is, just a continuous series of neat moments articulated in these genius little nuggets of game design. Even the extra modes are brilliant, like Real Survivor, which is like a realistic mode where item boxes no longer function universally, essentially neutering you of healing items and ammo whenever you enter a new area. Or if you're feeling like a bit of extra punishment, you could give Invisible Enemies mode a shot, which, like the title suggests, is completely fucked. If you aren't familiar with this game in the same way that I'm familiar with female rejection, then by Christ, prepare for a fisting of epic proportions. It's the little things like these that keep the game interesting. Secret costumes, bonus weapons, multiple endings, well-designed trophies. They even give you a personal letter by Shinji Mikami himself congratulating you on your efforts if you manage to platinum the whole thing. Like, who does that? One of the best fucking video games of all time, that's what. Here, I'll read it to you. Thank you for taking the time to play all the way through Resident Evil. If you're reading this letter, I salute you. You truly are a remarkable player. I imagine you must have had some pretty memorable experiences along the way. The pain of seeing the game over screen time and time again. The sweet taste of victory after you finally beat the game, and the feeling of camaraderie you shared with your character. The excitement and the overwhelming sense of dread. We believe that games are more than just the product of a team of developers. It takes the support of dedicated players like you to make a game worthwhile. And for this reason, we are truly delighted when someone enjoys one of our games as thoroughly as you have. Therefore, on behalf of the entire staff, please allow me to express our gratitude and congratulate you on a job well done. Thank you so much for playing, Shinji Mikami. Fuck me, this game is good. S tier. S fucking tier, goddamn. Now for me, Resident Evil 2 was a game of firsts. My first over-the-shoulder Resident Evil experience, my first dabble in the shoes of Leon, the S stands for smooth-brained Kennedy, and the titular bearer of the Redfield bloodline, and my first ever dip into the modern era of the franchise. Now, playing from a chronological perspective, within the first few minutes of playing on hardcore, it felt like the devs were trying to tell me something.
Come on, let's go! I'm right here!
Randy!
Sit down before you get hurt! Motherfucker! Go! What you got?
Looks like what I thought was a handicap was actually saving my ass all along. Due to the fixed camera angles of RE0 and 1, your character can only really aim left or right unless they're delivering the finishing blow or looking to get a headshot with the shotgun, meaning that the general complexity of combat usually boiled down to as long as you're not close and you're pointing in their general direction, they're probably going to die a long time before they become an actual threat. And within the first 5 minutes, on the first enemy of the game, RE2 throws that shit out the window. Regular zombies for the first time in the series are now very fucking dangerous. On hardcore, these things can take from anywhere to 3 to 11 headshots to finally be put down for good, and that's if you manage to land them all. The way these things bob and weave now, it's almost as if they're sentiently trying to Neo pass bullets and chomp your balls off, making being in a room with 2 or more at once an absolute fucking nightmare. A fair trade, considering your now increased mobility, offensive options, and overall decreased enemy count. Now you have to understand, by doing this in 2019, when every 5th release was...
Hey Joe, you wanna play a zombie game?
Jesus Christ, how many fucking zombie games you buying, Joe?
Hey Joe, you wanna play a zombie game?
No, I don't wanna fucking play another goddamn zombie game!
Capcom still managed to find a way to make zombies scary again, and slow ones at that. Like, these things are lumbering, gangly fucking idiots, yet when I'm fully immersed into the game, I would rather be fisted by 1,000 hands than let any one of these things anywhere near me. They are that terrifying. There's also a huge number of quality of life improvements I very much appreciate after playing the games released in 2002. Little things like the way you can see each bullet leave its own individual wound, scraping more and more skin and muscle tissue the more lead pellets you pour into them. The way you can now individually target separate limbs instead of just the entire body as a whole means you now have the liberty of just capping them in the knees instead of having to kill them outright, or just pop a flashbang, or a grenade, or just avoid the entire situation altogether by grouping them together by baiting their lunge attacks and getting past that way. The amount of options you have in all situations has increased dramatically, from having to decide from either just tanking the hit or pumping ammo. The pacing has become much faster too, thanks to the removal of the door opening animations. Although this removes that initial iconic suspense of entering an area for the first time, it makes future playthroughs much less tedious, which for players who are gunning for the platinum like myself, a fucking godsend. Boss fights could use a touch up though. Boss fights have never really been a high point for the Resident Evil series as a whole, but at least the ones in RE0 and 1 were never tedious to the point of boredom or frustration. In RE2, bosses have now become these 10-minute merry-go-rounds of endlessly circling terrain and pumping lead into these fucked up floppy skin creatures that eat bullets harder than Chris Rock eats hands. But juxtaposing these hurdles is the excellently designed Mr. X. Around the halfway point, he begins to stalk you throughout the RPD, his footsteps becoming an omnipotent symbol of his dominance over the police station. He adds this dynamic and strategic component to the game for you to plan around, springing forth these hectic confrontations of combat and withdrawal. And speaking of confrontation, the way these characters react to the most repugnant shit is hilarious to me. Like, respectively, Leon and Claire witness inside-out eyeball flesh men, grabby toilet monsters, giant sewer crocodiles, Venus flytrap monsters, and the presumed killing of a small child. And just when you'd think they'd lose their faith in God, humanity, life itself, their reaction is just...
Son of a bitch! What the hell? Oh, what the fuck? You bastard!
And although I find the setting of the RPD less captivating than that of the Spencer Mansion, I still love the thought of police officers yelling at each other because Jensen misplaced the fucking diamond key again, and now they can't get to their desks. The whole experience is a blast from gas station to laboratory, as the player character grows in their arsenal and item slots alongside the player's confidence in confronting enemies, all climaxing in your now certified badass protagonist landing the final killing blow followed by a cheesy one-liner. It is a textbook example of the synchronized player and protagonist character arc. What more could you ask for? What was that? Free DLC? Well, fuck me. I guess there is more you could ask for. 5 additional missions with varying degrees of challenge, all culminating in the absolutely grueling Forgotten Soldier mission. It even lets you play as a sentient piece of tofu that slurs hysterically in Japanese, like go and buy this game right now. S tier. I fucking hate this game. I really do. Resident Evil 3 for me is also a game of firsts. The first RE title that I prefer putting a shotgun in my asshole and pulling the trigger over playing again. Okay, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. I don't like this game. Most of my disliking probably stems from the fact that a game made in 1999 on the PS1 was somehow more ambitious than its 2020 AAA counterpart. It starts off well enough. From the title screen alone, I was getting excited. The new Nemesis design is fucking sick. I love his new loose, fleshy skin and new nose. It's as if he's been slapped and stapled together with whatever biomatter they had on hand, like they just entered a competition to make the most fucked up abomination possible. I find the majority of things this game does get right relates to the visuals. The new enemy designs are phenomenal. You've got these new gaping sewer monsters exclusive to the remake, and when they catch you, Jill gets fucking folded like a pancake. The new vagina head tentacle monsters are disgusting. It really gives you an incentive to avoid them at all costs. And the new hunter design, oh my god, finally, after 26 years, they actually managed to make these things look cool. I love when you shoot them, the little scaled giblets fly off, revealing the little tusks beneath. Although I'm guessing it can't be that hard to make things look pretty when all your assets are just reused from RE2. So how does the game rebalance itself after adding all these brand new and more condensed enemies whilst making fighting and traversal arenas more claustrophobic altogether? Well, you start by dramatically increasing ammo drops and implementing a brand new evasion mechanic. What a great way to establish the tonal transition to the more action-based Resident Evils through gameplay mechanics, is what I'd love to say if the dodge button wasn't completely fucking broken. See, every time you press the dodge button, you are gambling with your life, a 50-50 coin flip in which you could either make it by unscathed or lose a chunk of your ass cheek, all depending on the whims of if the game is feeling generous or not. For whatever reason, boss fights lack this issue, as I found dodging to be extremely consistent in those instances, but otherwise this shit is Russian roulette. This is something that is extremely difficult to look past when it serves as your primary new defense mechanism when defending against the much more aggressive hordes. Especially on higher difficulties, when one bite is the difference between full health and death, investing in a consistent and dependable dodge button is something developers should probably look into. Maybe it was a time constraint thing and it had to be cut out, along with the clock tower section, and the multiple choice system, and the giant spiders, and the open-ended level design, and the gravedigger. I don't know if it speaks to the quality of the original or the shoddiness of the remake, but when the visuals and voice acting are the only things that are of note in terms of positive changes from a game made more than 2 decades ago, then something has really fucked up here. There were even some downright
What the fuck were they thinking?
level oversights in terms of enemy design. Like, I thought we established nearly 30 years ago that if you're having something chasing you that can attack, you need to have the camera facing backwards so that
Come on, you creep!
doesn't happen. And despite all the new opportunities of finally innovating and giving bosses any semblance of quality in the RE franchise, since, you know, you're working with the poster boy of all Resident Evil baddies in this game, they were still too lazy to shake the RE2 tradition of constant circle strafing and sprinting. Seriously, during all the actual boss fights apart from one, if you just run away, they will never, ever be able to hit you, and you can just pop off shots at your leisure. Sure, if you were feeling adventurous, you could bait the attack, hit the dodge at the perfect time, and counter with a slow-mo punish, but why risk it when running and popping off the occasional shot is just as effective? It is an RE game after all, the series famous for the importance of intelligently managing inventory, So it seems like the devs are intentionally discouraging the more fun method of playing the game. After all, why would you risk losing a potential healing item for a moment that has no long-term benefit to you whatsoever? It only seems like they managed to get their shit together for the final boss fight, in which if you've cranked the difficulty up to hardcore or inferno, strap yourself in for what I would at least consider the greatest boss fight in the history of Resident Evil. This fight is nothing like the running away and strafing we've become accustomed to all throughout the game and the games before, but rather a legitimate, honest-to-goodness, back-and-forth battle of reflexes, aiming, predicting attacks, and most importantly of all, patience. In the final breath of this wall of snot, he's going to throw everything at you, relentlessly, with the fastest and by far most damaging attacks in the entire game. And just when you think you finally have his attack pattern down just right, he hits you with the flurry, baiting you out for one last dodge, which if you fall for it, and you will, welcome to Pancake City, fuckhead. Now try again from the top, but
Be on my fucking time!
I'm gonna be on your time.
it is exhilarating entering that zen mode and dodging everything he throws at you, only to finally retaliate with a slow-mo pop-off, followed by one of the most satisfying boss deaths I've ever seen, considering how many fucking times I died to this guy. My god. But this sweet dance is the only little scrap of good game design they decide to generously give after one of the most infuriating, bullshit designed, terrible slogs of a difficulty mode in the entire series. 1 step forward, 10 steps back. C tier.
Resident Evil 4.
And so begins the revolution. Not only does a new era of Resident Evil begin with this game, but a whole new era of video games as a whole, for it would serve to be the first time the series would pry that camera from its noble perch and let it dangle at the side of the protagonist and mingle with the common folk. Uncharted, Spec Ops, Dead Space, The Last of Us, even fucking Deity Maiming Simulator would take inspiration from this game eventually in their reinvention of the franchise. But that was nearly 20 years ago, an age where this was considered sexy, and I still routinely shat myself as I still couldn't figure out how toilets worked yet. What I'm trying to say is that from someone who's grown up in the PS3/PS4 era of video games, this thing could use a remaster. Obviously not from the ground up, like everyone knows that the core of this game is rock solid. It's just that, well, don't you think that most of it kind of looks like shit? I know it's something the game can't help. Hell, the only reason RE0 and 1 look so good despite their age is because they cheated with fixed camera angles. Video games are unfortunately one of the most disposable mediums in the world. You can listen to music, read a book and watch a movie from the 70s or 80s and have a great time, but anyone nowadays raised in the modern era of video games trying to go back and jam out with some battle tanks on Atari is going to need a whole slab of broken marriage liquid before having any sense of a good time. It really is a testament to how good this game is that despite being held back by limitations set nearly 20 years ago, it still manages to be so thrilling. But despite what anyone says about this game being the perfect blend of action and horror, it's not scary. None of these 3 entries in the series are. It drives me fucking insane when people say that RE5 and 6 are bad because it ditched all the horror from the series. Apart from the fact that RE without horror inherently just equals awful game 0 out of 10, it's just a shitty take outright that we'll be getting to later, I find the idea of people being as terrified as they claim to be throughout this game fucking hilarious. This game is goofy. Maybe back in 05, the Chainsaw Man and the night section with Ashley got a few scares and had everyone having fat chats around the water cooler, but in my experience, there was only one moment in the entire game that truly got me all clenched up, and I think we know the exact moment that I'm talking about. I think that the new tools and melee options you're given in combating the hordes really sucks out any of the tension when it comes to dealing with them, as I feel that true horror comes from a sense of being truly helpless in these situations, like in RE2. When enemies approach you and you shoot in retaliation, the visual of how useless your bullets are on these creatures really amplifies how fucked you feel in this situation. But Nari 4, you shoot them in the head and they fucking feel it. Like literally, they keel back, grab their face in pain for like 7 seconds before you do an epic action kick and watch them all cartoonishly fly back and knock all their friends over like they're fucking bowling pins. The Ganados yell at you with these really funny and now iconic sayings that my uncle used to yell at my siblings and I when we were kids that had us dying of laughter. And the fact that during all this goofy shit, some people are, as they say, literally trembling in what they consider the pinnacle of horror in this medium. Like, get fucked. This game is just an action-filled romp through and through, and you know it. What I'm trying to say is that this game doesn't need to be the scariest game ever made to be a masterpiece. This game's still fucking awesome despite not being that scary. The pacing of this game is majestic. It has this special and unique charm to it where you'll be fighting cultist farmers in a village to having boulders flung at you from a giant medieval castle to doing puzzles surrounded in lava and then running for your life from a giant statue of a midget man and then playing the claw game with Ganados all without it falling apart is nothing short of magic. The weapons finally have this weight to them that was missing in RE2 and 3 where you can really feel the kick of a shotgun or the destructive force of a grenade. It's the first game to introduce currency into the series with pesetas and this object of pure sexual desire, really incentivizing you to explore every single nook and cranny of the game in order to get any edge up in every situation you can. It becomes so exciting every time you see him as the game is constantly throwing new weapons, armor, upgrades and cases at you in tandem with the game's increasing difficulty. Unfortunately, in my experience, the game does feel like it's outstaying its welcome a bit near the end. Like, you're ready for it to end and to fight the final boss hours before it actually happens. Like, the game has shown you everything there is to see, but before reaching its natural conclusion, it throws like 40 more Ganado fights at you before finally giving you the final throwdown with Sadler. But in my eyes, a game being a bit too long is 1000% more forgivable than a game that feels 3 hours too short. Now, does this game still hold up today against the modern games of which it inspired? I don't know. In my opinion, this game is a bit overrated. It's certainly fun as all hell, but I don't see myself replaying it over any of the others, I guess. I often forget how good this franchise is, that although I perceive this game as pretty good in the series, it manages to completely shit on most other games on the market at the moment. Like, I'd say for all that it's done for the franchise and the medium as a whole, it's gotta go in A tier.
Resident Evil 5.
RE5 is an interesting specimen of a game in that I both adore and fucking hate it. The gripe that RE5 was the entry that strayed too far from the horror elements of Resident Evil is completely irrelevant to me, as I never found 4 scary in the first place. In that sense, it serves as the continuation of the action elements that 4 introduced to the franchise. So, how well does it do that? Pretty fucking well, I must say. The game's action is just as, if not more, thrilling and satisfying than in 4, thanks to all the quality of life improvements of the 7th generation of consoles. Better textures, eerier and more detailed character models, more plentiful and expressive melee animations, and a homie to tag along for the ride. I also found the setting of Africa to be far more interesting than that of Europe. That initial playthrough with Chris walking through the market streets, it feels as if the air itself has this palpable sense of grime, like in Far Cry 2, as onlookers glare at you from afar. Really gives you the feeling that you've come to the wrong place at the wrong time. And speaking of Chris Redfield, I've heard criticism of his transition from mild-mannered cop to this stoic beacon of masculinity, his triceps glistening in the warm glow of the African sun, only growing in size for every life he snuffs out with his Rippling. Wait, what? What was I talking about? Oh, right, character development, yeah. I love Chris. I love how he's become this straightforward meathead and the human manifestation of a goody two-shoes. He perfectly represents the series' transition from survival horror to all-out action. It seems like they really streamlined things a lot, as they were definitely expecting high sales for this one. There's co-op, no more briefcase Tetris, meaning it's now been replaced by a 3x3 column setup, which definitely helps in speeding up the pace of the action, finally being able to switch weapons on the fly with the D-pad, or just a quick fiddle with the menu. However, this slight convenience in speed has now caused a very annoying issue, where one egg now takes up as much space as a rocket launcher. So overall, I'd consider it a bit of a downgrade from the iconic briefcase of 4. There's no more merchant, probably because the PS3 processor couldn't handle that many sexy specimens on screen at once, and for some reason, despite being released in 2009, you still can't aim and move at the same time. Not that I mind though, it kind of adds a sort of charm to RE4 and 5, and it's not as if these games aren't designed with that in mind. It definitely adds to the tension when you're being approached by a giant cockroach that insta-kills you, and you straight up have to choose to either stand your ground and try and deal enough damage for it to stop, or just to cut your losses and book it. Now, depending on if you have friends or not, your level of enjoyment in this game could vary drastically, and considering that I'm someone who likes to make YouTube videos in my spare time, I was stuck with the AI, therefore crippling my enjoyment of the game. Don't get me wrong, there are still other options. The online presence of this game is shockingly lively. Every time I set my game to public for anyone to join, someone's always playing with me within the next 10 to 15 minutes. I guess it's the best selling game in the whole franchise for a reason. The first time I ever played the game, someone joined in chapter 1 and gave me infinite gold eggs, making it so I never had to worry about healing for the rest of the whole game, which in the process of trying to platinum every game in the series is very much appreciated. Probably cut down the time it took to make this video by days. Don't worry though, infinite healing items didn't really matter on professional anyways, where every attack is a one-hit kill. However, I don't really like the idea of playing with randoms who had already finished the game 100 times. If someone was going to play with me, they'd have to know nothing about the game either. So, I took it alone. And fuck me, was it painful, especially on professional. My god, Capcom have scientifically engineered the co-op AI to be the most infuriating fucking thing since ingrown ass hair. In the mid to late game, the AI becomes so stupid, you literally have to baby them through some sections, watching their every move. I promise 3/4 of all your healing items are going to be used on strictly them alone. To be fair, you do get the occasional badass moment where the AI cooperates in combat and you end up doing some really cool shit together, like the combo takedowns, and they'll always be there to revive you or come running whenever you need to progress to the next stage. But for how inconsistent they are as a whole, those good moments aren't nearly enough to be acceptable. And speaking of unacceptable, these fucking QuickTime events are ludicrous. In RE4, they were a fun gimmick that kept you alert and gave you some spectacle for some of the boss fights and set pieces, and the same mostly goes for 5, except for the sum you get during gameplay. Some of these mid-fight QTEs, I swear you have to press them within milliseconds to not get pancaked. Shit is frustrating. But on a more positive note, I can finally attest with pride that as of RE5, bosses as a whole are finally making the beautiful transition to not shit. Each one of these have a neat little gimmick to learn before you dump ammo into them, whilst some are a bit dumb, like Wesker not being able to see you in the dark.
Just take the sunnies off, dickhead!
They definitely up the quality of the boss fights overall. Now some say an action-oriented Resident Evil with co-op, combo takedowns, giant squid monsters, and doped up evil supermen, all climaxing in a volcanic fist fight with a boulder and a double rocket launcher finish, isn't nuanced enough for them. And to that I say,
Don't be such a fucking wet blanket.
this shit is fun and you know it. Stop pretending to be superior to others by screeching that you only like your terribly written, poorly acted, convoluted mess of a franchise when there's nuance and subtlety to it. As for ranking, the positive additions and quality of life improvements in 5 are nice, but the unfair QTEs and AI partner had me frustrated a lot more than I'd like. Maybe if Capcom had just stuck to their guns and made the solo experience like in the early trailers, as well as giving more inventory space that we can buy with in-game currency to help achieve that sense of progression that they nailed in 4. In my eyes, if it was something like that, RE5 would essentially be the perfect sequel, but as it stands, it kind of hurts to say, but I think it belongs in B tier.
Resident Evil 6.
I can't believe people hate this game. This had to be one of the most fun games I've played in a long time, let alone in the series. I guess it's because, with the benefit of hindsight, I just get to enjoy the game for what it is instead of worrying about the death of survival horror and how it killed Resident Evil. I do get where people are coming from though. Resident Evil is a very unique property. There really aren't many games like it at all, especially in the early days of the franchise. So that fear that it's going to become a Bayonetta or Vanquish style of game forever will be a hard blow to lovers of that traditional inventory management, save every bullet, backtracking style of survival horror. But it's okay. We know now that the series went back into the direction of the OG, so you can stop screeching about it now and perhaps look past your gamer rage and digest this game for what it is and form your own opinion outside of the hate mob. Anyways, fresh out the gate, this game is immediately better than 5, and for one reason. They have discovered a way to remove the extra chromosomes from the partner AI, so now not only are they actually useful in combat and hold their own in helping you fight the Horde, Capcom have now made the godly decision to make them immortal. This means that no matter how much they get their shit mixed by zombies, zombies with guns with a cockroach for an ass, and
my own race of atomic monsters, atomic supermen with octagonal-shaped bodies that suck blood out of you.
They're just gonna walk it off like a fucking champ now, so you can actually play the game instead of having 95% of your brain power occupied with trying to keep this sack of shit alive. Not only that, they don't need ammo either, meaning that there's actually a fair few advantages to playing by yourself than with a friend. That being, other players consume ammo, healing items, and can set your progress back if they die. Granted, they're not going to be solving the Pythagorean theorem anytime soon, as they sure as fuck can be goofy as hell. It's still crazy that just a few changes that could have been done with a few lines of code enabling your partner God mode and infinite ammo would have fixed the only real deal-breaking problem with RE5. But not only are your partners serving as homies throughout 3 of the 4 campaigns, in most cases they can also serve as vastly different playstyles, examples being how Piers has a rifle he can switch between automatic and semi-automatic fire, and a sniper that hits harder than Chris Brown from the get-go. Much like in RE1, if you pick Chris, you get shafted with worse resources, in this case being a machine gun, pistol, and a pathetic little knife. Although, Chris does get much faster and, in my experience, more effective melee moves. Although by the end of the game, Piers gains the power of Zeus to smite motherfuckers, but we won't get into that. Speaking of, Jake and Sherry have the most melee-focused campaign in the entire game, with the first half of Chapter 3 dedicated entirely to stealth killing and using their distinct fighting styles to escape captivity. Oh yeah, Sherry's back now. Remember playing as little Sherry Birkin, sneaking around and solving little toy puzzles and trying to sneak past Old Man Irons? Well, she's all grown up now, and has repressed all that naughty childhood trauma by developing a frightening passion for tasing people and WWE. Seems like a common theme in the RE lore. In the meantime, Leon and Helena seem to be having the least amount of differences gameplay-wise. In terms of the story, Leon's still doing his simp thing for Ada, and Helena is yelling a lot. I don't know. The story is naturally retarded. This is Capcom we're talking about here. Apparently Ada Wong has an evil twin now, because it turns out there's another guy who was even more down bad for Ada than Leon, named Simmons, who decided to clone her so he could finally smash, but she escaped, and now she wants to destroy the world, but not before fucking over my boy Chris for some reason, so now he wants to punch Ada's face in with the same vigor he punches Boulder's butt when he finds her. Leon's all like, don't kill her, I'm trying to smash, and then he's like,
Simp! Oh my gosh, how you turn to a Chad to a simp?
So then they fight, and then in the meantime, Jake and Sherry are kung fu fighting a robo-armed nemesis monster. I don't know, man, it's fucking stupid. No one at all should take these stories seriously. Though I had no idea what was going on, I did like the way that the campaigns converge almost seamlessly with each other. Like, you could be Chris, helping Sherry in a shared boss fight, killing zombies in Russia, and then fucking around dodging mines in China with Leon, and then as Leon, you end up hot-wiring a bus with Sherry to help fight the Nemesis monster, and then as Ada Wong, be firing pot shots at zombies trying to kill Sherry as a sort of guardian angel mission. And then later, near the end, you'll be chased around by Chris, because he still thinks you killed his men, even though it was your clone. It's all really neat. I like the way all their stories fold and tangle together like a big pile of spaghetti. It gives everything this really cool sense of scale and makes things feel like the entire Resident Evil series has been culminating up to this climactic point in the story where all these characters converge together. Just wish we could have seen some more familiar faces instead of Piers and Helena. Like maybe instead having Sheva return with Chris, or have Leon and Claire team up again. It'd make that confrontation with Chris all the more impactful, as he'd see his own flesh and blood trying to save the woman who killed all of his men. But anyways, I'm pretty much writing my own fanfiction at this point. In terms of gameplay, the series has never been better, in my opinion. This is by far the most fluid movement has ever been in these games by far, finally giving us back the ability to aim and walk at the same time. On top of that, a directional mechanic has been implemented where you can now do an action roll away from danger and maybe pop off a few shots if you're feeling cheeky. This means you no longer have to commit to either pure attack in shooting or defense in running away, as you can do both now seamlessly. Coupling the faster pacing of combat, the long awaited implementation of legitimately well-designed boss battles with interesting and not tedious mechanics, and set pieces that I consider to be not only the best in the entire franchise, but some of the best and most thrilling in the industry, even giving Naughty Dog a run for their money, especially when given the opportunity to play with a friend. Each campaign gives a sense of variety that I felt 4 and 5 really needed. If you're up for that sort of Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, Man vs Zombie gameplay, Leon's campaign has you covered with a more simplistic style. His campaign also has the most throwbacks to older titles like 3's fighting through an apocalyptic city, and elements of 4 when you're solving puzzles in the cathedral and fighting a zombie shark thing. But if you're feeling more of a military shooter style with more intelligent enemies and interesting weapons and mutations, then Chris's campaign has you covered. I also think that Chris's has the strongest story in terms of themes, serving as more of a revenge plot, where Chris's lust for revenge for Ada killing all of his men in Russia causes him to disregard his new mission in China when he finds out that she's in town. So he tracks her down and tries to kill her, but in the process ends up ironically killing all of his men as they become casualties in his revenge mission. It was also the only campaign that gave me any sort of emotional twinge in the heartstrings. Jake and Sherry's campaign is definitely the most out there of the bunch, which is saying something considering all the other shit that goes down in the other campaigns. This in turn makes it the perfect campaign to play with friends out of the whole bunch. Seriously, I got a mate absolutely hooked on this game just by playing a bit of Sherry's campaign with them. It's definitely the easiest and the most fun due to its extreme diversity in set pieces. However, my favourite of the whole bunch had to be Ada's. There's something that just felt so cool about being this secret spy working by yourself in the background of all the other characters' campaigns, knowing full well of everything that was going on and watching from afar as the other characters scramble to figure everything out. There's also something I just find more personally fulfilling in working by yourself instead of having a partner tag along, as it gives off that sort of one-man army sort of feel. I think it takes a lot of balls for any sort of medium to go all out, for lack of a better term. It seems that Capcom made it their mission to make the most kick-ass, over-the-top action shooter they possibly could, and my god, did they succeed in doing that. I know for a fact this game would have absolutely received the recognition it deserves if it had released under any other name besides Resident Evil. For whatever reason, at the time, the gaming community just could not wrap their head around this game being in the same series that they grew up with, and in turn showcased a prime example of their overwhelming fear of change. But as time ticks onward, I'm beginning to see more and more people open up to how truly fun this game is and share their experiences, mine of which will safely secure it in the A tier on the account of being fucking sick. Well, I guess this is Capcom's way of saying,
I'm back, baby!
survival horror is back, and it's back with a vengeance, kicking off the modern era of Resident Evil with one of the best games in the entire genre. From the title screen menu alone, the whole world knew this was going to be something different, but at the same time, what Resident Evil has been known for since its inception within the walls of the Spencer Mansion. That being doing everything within its power to make you excrete liquid chocolate all over the back of your pants. This has to be the scariest game in the franchise, hands down, as the Japanese have discovered the secret ingredient to making any situation scary, and that is rednecks. This family is fucked. Daddy Baker and Marguerite especially, Jesus Christ. The first half of this game is a masterpiece in the medium of survival horror. I haven't played anything this strong since those first magical playthroughs of RE0 and 1. Despite the amount of fun I was having with the action side of things, I have to admit I was giddy when I found myself with the hairs on the back of my neck sticking up and that overwhelming sense of relief when you enter a save room. The way this franchise seems to translate these feelings of warmth when you're locked away in the save rooms, allowing you to collect your thoughts and simmer in the calming yet eerie music that the room provides, only for it to abruptly cut out as you take your first steps out the door and the nightmare begins again. The game begins pretty strong, despite being a bit scripted. I never felt much danger or tension in my battle with Mia, despite the fact that you can die, though it does set the themes of being in way over your head perfectly. The juxtaposition between the absolute badasses you're playing as in 6 and the new protagonist Ethan Winters is so jarring. You're shown so much imagery of the disgusting and inhumane things these freaks can do to you, whilst whenever you try to retaliate, everything you do bothers them as much as maintaining cultural diversity does to, well, them. The game shines then when you're looking for whatever keys or cranks you need to progress, and then you start hearing Daddy Baker taunting you through the walls, and when you're exploring, you'll always be hearing these ambient little sounds, perfectly designed to make you always question how close he really is in relation to you, as the tension builds and builds, and then just when you least expect it, bang, off to buy some new underwear. And then just when you think you've gotten used to bobbing and weaving rampaging Republicans, the game throws something completely different at you in the form of Lucas, and everything shifts from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Saw. You'll be disarming trip mines, fake supply boxes that explode when you break them, and wrapping your head around life or death puzzles. Like RE1, the pacing feels like this continuous showcase of iconic moments that string together to form a gem of game design, but that is until you reach the late game, where things begin to fall apart. See, past Resident Evil games have this trend where they'd always have very well designed basic enemies, but shit boss fights. RE7 says fuck that, I'm going to flip it around and do the exact opposite, having the best boss enemies in the series, but the worst fodder as well. Although, I won't lie, the first time I saw these things secrete from the walls and start lumbering towards me was amazing. I'd never seen anything like these weird, moist monster things. They absolutely shine in the early game when exploring the original house, and especially the basement, even when there's no enemies at all. Wandering around that area is spine-tingling, but later on the game starts throwing crawling types and heavy boys. It all starts to feel a bit samey, like you've fought enough of them for them to stop being threatening, so the game tries to fix that by throwing as many as they possibly can at you. But even then, with the overabundance of ammo you get in this game, by the time you finish the section with Lucas, any semblance of tension is snuffed out. I mean, how couldn't it when you have 35 shotgun rounds, 20 advanced handgun bullets, 40 regular bullets, a machine gun with 400 bullets, a grenade launcher, a hand cannon that shreds everything, enough remote bombs to tile your floor with, and of course, the fucking flamethrower, Jesus Christ. This game is constantly yelling at me to use the flamethrower. Use the flamethrower. I really think you should use the flamethrower by hurling more of its ammo than me than any other weapon type by far. You'll never see yourself dip below 400. But it serves as easily the least effective weapon in the entire game. You have to be practically belly to belly with them and watching horror as they beat the shit out of you. As you pray it tickles them to death before you're brutally murdered. I guess that's where Madhouse difficulty comes in. See, Madhouse not only makes you hit like a wet napkin at a little kid's birthday party and enemies hit like you're being skull fucked by a big brolic black man named Tiresias, items and weapons have completely different placements. Some sections of the game become shorter as more items are able to be bought with antique coins, whilst others become longer due to increased enemy counts. I knew I should have prepared lubricant when not even 2 minutes after shooting Farmer Jack's head open was he back on his feet looking for me again, instead of only returning during the scripted section in the bathroom on normal difficulty. It was brilliant. I was loving every second of it until I got to the late game again and realized
You done fucked it up!
See, instead of cutting back on the amount of ammo you get so you don't feel like Rambo, they still give you a disgusting amount of it by the time you finish Lucas's area. Instead, they made it so that all ammo doesn't do shit, making every enemy guzzle bullets with the same vigor that animated schoolgirls guzzle cum. The mine section on Madhouse had to be one of the worst slogs I'd ever had the displeasure of experiencing in this franchise. I had all this ammo again, but it wasn't very useful against one-hit kill enemies that take 7 Albert shots to take down. By the time they threw 3 fatties at me that can take more than 400 machine gun rounds each, back to back, I said fuck this and started cheesing back, exploiting the AI with positioning and the knife, which is not fun. I wish they were more creative with it like they were in the beginning of the game, maybe lowering how much damage enemies can take but also lowering ammo drop significantly, and having Farmer Jack come back to life and chase you up the mine shaft when you get halfway. I don't know, anything besides giving the enemies impossible amounts of health. But really, that section is only like 1/6 of the whole game. The rest is superb. It's actually insane that the 8th chronological game in the entire franchise is the first one I had any real investment in plot-wise. Sure, the other games had great characters, themes, atmospheres, and overarching ideas, but this was the first time I legitimately was driven to read every note, lap up every bit of environmental storytelling, and piece together what the actual fuck is going on with this family. And in addition to the main game, you also have these quality little nuggets of game design in the DLC, especially in the lost footage section, that really help to flesh out the backstory of this once loving family of psychos. You get the brilliantly tense bedroom level where you have to escape Marguerite before she feeds you to death. But if you don't put everything back where you found it, she figures out you're trying to escape and murders your ass. Or the prequel mission with Zoe where you have to escape Mama and Papa Baker on their first signs of infection. That does wonders in terms of world building. Moreover, it really feels like the game comes full circle in terms of progression when you're going from pathetically picking away at enemies with Ethan to beating the shit out of them with your bare hands as Chris Redfield and Joe Baker. It gives this ultimate sense of catharsis to go up to something that had you coiling in fear at the beginning of the game and just throw hands at it till it dies. I also think that ditching all the government conspiracy plots and evil corporation stuff helped to make this game feel far more grounded and immersive as an experience. For someone who's never even heard of the franchise, I think it would be a perfect place to start. Despite a very rough final act, the overwhelming enjoyment I got out of the whole experience has got to put it up in A tier. Ladies and gentlemen, this, I think, has to be my favorite game in the whole franchise. I know opinions on it are mixed, but hear me out. You know how this game is basically RE4, you know, with the focus on action and the more out there locations, the merchant, inventory Tetris, separating key items from everything else you need to carry, and even shooting gems off fucking walls. When I play this game, I get the feeling that this is what someone playing RE4 for the first time back in 05 would feel. And that is that this game is a masterpiece. Much like RE4, this is not a horror game. This is a very eerie action game with some horrifying moments sprinkled in there. Although in my experience, this game is much more frightening due to several reasons, one being the quality of life improvements in enemy variety and jank, as well as the removal of all things campy from the game. Now, I know that the camp in RE4 is what made it as beloved as it is today, and in my experience, I had a lot of fun with it. But I can't become immersed in the horror elements of a title when all the characters are this goofy. That's just how my brain perceives horror. It physically can't be scared unless situations are taken seriously, i.e. Outlast and Slender the Arrival. And that's not at all an attack on anyone who can both have a laugh at the camp and tense up at the horror scenes later. If you can, good for you. I'd wish I was like that so that I could enjoy RE4 as much as everyone says I should. With that being said, let's compare the opening village attacks, where an invisible timer ticks away, giving you a certain amount of time you need to both not die in the game and not shit yourself in real life as you scramble to survive against the horde. In RE4, for as plentiful as the Ganados are, it is much less likely that Leon is going to feel overwhelmed, and that's because of the multitude of options he has in gameplay. He can run away faster than every villager, his attacks stagger more often, and enemies' movements are far more predictable. However, in 8, the Lycan are fucking dangerous, like extremely dangerous. Like, not only do these things try to flank you at every opportunity, whenever you try and fight back, they'll be bobbing and weaving so fast, you don't even have a chance to think before you're being ganked to death. And even if you do manage to get a shot in, they don't coil back in pain and grab their face so you can kick them to help with crowd control and run away. These things don't give a fuck. They're just gonna keep coming until you've landed like 3 or 4 shots. On my initial playthrough on hardcore, before lowering the difficulty to standard, I was legitimately dumbfounded as to how the hell I was gonna survive an entire game of these things when I died at this section around 10 to 15 times already. But that's the amazing thing about the character progression in this game. You go from barely being able to handle 1, or God forbid 2 of these things at a time, to having sections near the end where you're facing entire rooms filled to the brim with them, and you're setting up mine traps, sniping cunts, popping off headshots like it's fucking Tuesday at the office. This also mounts in the perfect catharsis when you play as Chris Redfield, Cock of Thunder, and the game gives you a machine gun with 1,000 bullets and essentially pats you on the back and tells you, go have some fun, just mow down some enemies. Though I wish they just gave us Chris as the protagonist from the start instead of this bag of wet sand. Unfortunately, he's the only real issue that at all had me annoyed throughout the game. Ethan sucks so bad. The man who writes his dialogue in this game should be put into a cannon and fired into the sun. In RE7, I found him to be more of a surrogate for the player, as his reactions to things are generally what I was thinking in that moment.
The fuck are you, Mia?
But in this game, he's just fucking lame, man.
I'm sick of bugs.
He can only say 2 different things, and that is,
What's going on? What? What? What was that thing? What?
and
Rose. Where's Rose? Rose is here? I just want to fix my daughter. Rose.
and everything he says in between is so lame, it hurts.
You're the one who's cursed.
Which is so strange, as this game shines more than any other in terms of villains. You got Lady D, the Man-Eater, and her daughters serving as the sort of successor to Jack Baker as she stalks you around her castle as you pick off her daughters one by one and piece together the things you need to leave the place. All climaxing when Lady D shows her true form and you do this sniper battle on the roof of the church and then slam her back down to the ground for the finish as payback for all the fucked up things she did to you back in there. Then you make your way to the dollhouse, where the game reaches its peak in terms of horror in what serves as, in my opinion, the most terrifying experience in the entire series. The way the doll torments Ethan with all this imagery of his dead wife and soon to be dead daughter, to the mannequin of Mia and the piecing together of old movies, and then finally climaxing in this fucking horrifying chase from this baby abomination. Her fucked up, mutated look symbolizing his guilt for what's going to happen to Rose if he fails to protect her from being raised by Mother Miranda. It is by no exaggeration, perfection. The game then makes the shift from the more Outlast style of gameplay to a puzzle boss with the terribly insecure fish monster, who hates himself and only desire is to be loved by his family. So you drain all the water out of his home and then start throwing fucking grenades at his head till he dies because
I'm a goddamn video game protagonist and therefore a hero.
Now by this point in the game, I was starting to get worried. I had way more ammo, health items, and money I thought I could possibly need. And I was thinking this was going to be just like RE7 all over again, where the final section is just going to be a slog with no tension. But then the game leads you to Heisenberg, and all those precious resources are thrown out the window as the game yeets enemies at you faster than your brain can even process, until you're being chased by metal cyborg men with drill arms in complete darkness, and the only thing you have to defend yourself with are flash grenades and a fucking pocket knife. It's brilliant. The pacing in this game is sublime. It knows just when to throw some section entirely different from the last to spice up gameplay that aren't just straight up silly. Like the Heisenberg section literally ends in a cyborg mech battle with chainsaws where he calls Chris, and it still manages to keep you 100% invested all throughout. And despite how lame Ethan is as a character, especially in regards to a series like Resident Evil, with some of the most badass protagonists in the entire medium, you can't watch this poor man who just wants to have a normal life with his family be subjected to the worst torture and terrifying imagery imaginable over the course of 2 games, only to die at the end at the cusp of achieving his goal of finally protecting his family once and for all, for it not to pull at a few heartstrings at least. Like, of course the dude isn't cool. No dads are besides a handful. He just wants to delete beers on the couch and watch some Big Bang Theory after a long day of work like every other dad, not deal with all this bullshit. But with that being said, and despite this game being my personal favourite, I know objectively it's not the best. Only one game I can truly admit was a flawless experience all throughout from beginning to end. But even then, this game easily earns its spot in S tier, hot on the heels behind one of the greatest games of all time. And we're done here. If you've made it this far, well, that really says a lot about you and your taste in YouTube videos. I want to thank you so much for sticking around through all my rambling. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Do you think I'm fat and ugly? I want to know. I'll be down there with you in the comments, keeping the discussion going. And with that being said, I'm going to leave you with my favourite video at the moment, and what could be us if you hit the subscribe button. Cheers, boys.